Hey everyone, my name is Cab Aurora. Hope you're doing well. Today, in this video, I need to tell you about a war that is already started. Not a war with the fighter jets, not a war with the nuclear missiles, a war with something far more basic, something every single human being on this planet needs to survive, a water. Right now in 2026, India has cut off Pakistan's water supply. Ethiopia has built the largest dam in Africa, and Egypt is threatening war over it. China is controlling the river of 5 different countries, and millions of people don't even know about it. And Turkey signed a deal where a country traded oil just to get water. This is not the future. This is happening today, right now. And here is what nobody's telling you. There is no global law that governs any of this. No world court that could stop it. No UN treaty that controls it. Every country that controls a river upstream can use it as a weapon legally. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where the world's most dangerous water wars are happening, who is winning, who is losing, and what happens next. So stay tuned till the end because it's going to get more interesting. Let's do it. Okay, before we go to the specific wars, I need to explain something important. You have heard about oil wars, the Gulf War, Iraq, all the conflicts over who controls the world's oil supply. But here is the truth. Oil isn't optional. You can survive without oil. You can ride a bike, you can go for a walk, you can just burn a wood. But you cannot survive without water, not for more than 3 days. And here is where the problem even gets more serious and even worse. Half of all people on Earth already face severe water shortages for at least 1 month every year. By 2040, that number goes up to 2/3 of humanity. And the countries that are most affected are exactly the countries that already have political tensions, nuclear weapons, and unstable governments. And here's what makes water different from oil and what makes it even more dangerous. When countries fight over oil, they fight over fields in the desert. The oil doesn't move. It doesn't flow across the borders. Water does. Rivers crosses the border. They flow from one country into the next. And where is upstream? Whoever lives nearest to the source of the water or river has total power over everyone downstream. Build a dam upstream, reduces the flow, hold the water, and the country below you slowly dies. Its crops fails, its people's thirst, its economy collapses. This is what is happening right now in 4 places around the world. And each is a powder keg Let's go through one by one. Okay, let's start with the most dangerous one because this one involves two countries that have nuclear weapons, India and Pakistan. In April 2025, 26 tourists were killed in a terrorist attack in Kashmir, a region both countries claim. India blamed Pakistan backed militant for the attack, and the very next day, April 23rd, 2025, India did something that shocked the entire world. It suspended the Indus Waters Treaty. The question is, what is the Indus Waters Treaty? Let me explain it very simply. The Indus River starts in Himalayas in India and then flows down into Pakistan. Pakistan depends on this river for almost everything. It provides water for agriculture across Pakistan's Punjab province, home to 247 million people. It provides 80% of Pakistan's irrigation water. If Indus dries up, Pakistan's food supply collapses. In 1960, after years of negotiation, India and Pakistan signed a deal, the Indus Waters Treaty. Even through wars, nuclear crisis, and decades of hostility, this treaty held. It survived everything. It was one of the most successful peace agreements in the history until April 2025. India said this treaty was signed in good faith. Pakistan has been supporting terrorism. We're suspending it. Pakistan's response was immediate. Their defense minister went on television and said, and I want you to hear this clearly because this is gonna be very interesting. The moment we feel our national security is under threat and water is part of our national security, we will go to the war. And this is exactly what he said when he was on a live television. And India's water minister responded by saying Pakistan would not get, quote, a single drop of Indus water in the coming years. These are two nuclear armed countries threatening war over water.
अब भारत का पानी भारत के हक में बहेगा.
Any attempt to stop the flow of water belonging to Pakistan would be responded to with full force and might.
India and Pakistan already had missile strikes against each other in May 2025, a military clash that US President Donald Trump had to personally intervene to stop it. And even after that ceasefire, the water treaty stayed suspended. The river became a weapon that the ceasefire couldn't undo. And here is the technical reality that makes this even more alarming. India is now building tunnels and diversion on rivers in Kashmir to redirect water away from Pakistan permanently. Pakistan has written to India 3 times in 2025 and 2026 about abnormal, abrupt changes in river flows. The window for diplomacy is closing. And when it closes, and if India successfully diverts the Indus, Pakistan faces an existential threat. A country of 250 million people without enough water is not a country that stays stable. It is a country that goes to the war. Okay, let's go to Africa because this story is just as dramatic and it's even more recent. The Nile River is the longest river in the world, and for thousands of years, it has been Egypt's lifeline. And Egypt is a desert country. It has almost no rainfall. The Nile provides 97% of Egypt's entire water supply. 100 million Egyptians depending on this river just for living. And in September 2025, Ethiopia turned on the biggest dam in Africa, directly upstream on Nile. It is called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. It cost $5 billion to build. It can hold 74 billion cubic meters of water. To put that in perspective, that is more water than Egypt uses in entire year. For Ethiopia, this dam is a symbol of pride and development. It generates electricity to power millions of homes, not just in Ethiopia, but across East Africa. Ethiopia calls it as a development project, a way to lift their people out of poverty. For Egypt, it is an existential threat. And here is what happened immediately after the dam was turned on. In October 2025, Egypt flooded. Parts of the Nile Delta went underwater. Egypt's government immediately blamed Ethiopia, saying uncontrolled water releases from the near dam that had caused catastrophic flooding. Ethiopia denied it, blaming heavily on monsoon rains. But the deeper problem is this. There is no legal agreement between Ethiopia and Egypt on how to operate this dam. They negotiated for years and they failed. Egypt wanted a binding legal framework that would guarantee minimum water flow during droughts. Ethiopia refused to sign anything that limited its sovereignty over its own dam. So today, Africa's largest dam sits on the world's most important river. And there is no treaty, no agreement, and no law governing how it operates. So Egypt didn't just threaten a war. It sent 10,000 troops to Somalia in early 2026. So the question is why? Because Somalia sits at the mouth of the Red Sea, and Ethiopia is trying to build a naval access to the same coastline. Egypt is surrounding Ethiopia military, not because of Somalia, but because of the Nile. Water doesn't just cause conflicts, it reshapes the entire military map of the region. Okay, now let's go to Southeast Asia, and this one involves China. The Mekong River is one of the most important rivers in the world. It flows from Southeast China through 6 countries: Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. It provides food and water for 70 million people. For many of these communities, the Mekong is not just a river, it is their entire economy. Fishing, rice farming, drinking water, all of it depends on Mekong flowing normally. Over the past 2 decades, China has built 12 massive dams on the upper Mekong, what China calls the Lansing River. These dams generate electricity for China, but they also give Beijing something far more valuable: the ability to turn the river on and off. And here is the evidence that they have used that power. In 2019, a severe drought hit Southeast Asia. River levels dropped to their lowest in a century. Rice fields went unplanted, fish populations collapsed, millions of people lost their livelihood. Vietnam and Cambodia were begging for water. They assumed China's dams were holding back water to conserve it during the drought. Then a US-funded satellite monitoring system revealed the truth. During the same period that Southeast Asia was suffering its worst drought, China's part of the Mekong was receiving normal to above normal rainfall. China's dams weren't holding water because of the drought. They were holding water by choice. While downstream countries were suffering, China kept the water. China denied all of this. Their foreign minister said China was trying to help, but the satellite data told a different story. China's Mekong dams are not just about electricity. They are the world's most sophisticated water weapon. Without firing a single bullet, without sending a single soldier, China can control the food supply and water security of 5 countries. When Vietnam and Cambodia criticize China's in international forums, China doesn't need to threaten them with missiles. It just needs to turn a valve. This is what modern power looks like today. And the 70 million people who depends on the Mekong live under it every single day. Our 4th Flashpoint takes us to the Middle East. And this one produced a deal so extraordinary, so desperate, that when I first read about it, I had to read it twice. In November 2025, Iraq signed a deal with Turkey, and the terms of this deal tell you everything you need to know about how serious the water crisis has become. Iraq agreed to use its oil export revenues to pay Turkey for water projects. Iraq is literally trading its most valuable resource, the oil, under its ground, for the water it needs to survive. The deal is called an oil for water agreement, and it happened because Iraq is facing its worst drought in 80 years. And here's why. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers, the rivers of ancient Mesopotamia, the same rivers that gave birth to the world's first civilizations, both begin in Turkey. Turkey controls 90% of the water that flows into the Euphrates. Over the past 30 years, Turkey has built 22 large dams on these rivers as part of the massive project called GAP project. The result? The water flow into Iraq has been reduced by at least 40%. Iraq, which is 90% depending on Euphrates and Tigris, almost as dependent as Egypt is on the Nile, is slowly drying out. In June 2025, Iraq called an emergency. Water must not be used as a political pressure card. 5 million people in Syria directly depend on the Euphrates and face drought. Kurdish communities in northern Syria have accused Turkey of deliberately cutting water flows as a weapon against them, as act that international law calls a war crime. Here is the more interesting part. In 2026, Turkey opened the floodgates of the Ataturk Dam, its largest dam on the Euphrates, releasing massive amount of water into Syria all at once. The result? Flooding, destroyed crops, killed livestock, deaths. For 7 years, Turkey had choked the river with drought. Then it opened it all at once. Whether you restrict the water or suddenly release it, both are weapons, and Turkey has mastered both. Now, I want to step back because after hearing about all 4 of these flashpoints, you might be asking a very reasonable question. Why is nobody stopping this? Where is the United Nations? Where is the international law? Where is the World Court? And the answer is the most important part of this entire video. There is no global water law. Let me say that again. There is no binding international agreement that governs how countries share rivers. There is no world court with the power to force a country to release water downstream. There is no UN treaty signed and enforceable that applies to any of the rivers we just discussed. The Indus Waters Treaty existed, but India suspended it, and the court of arbitration that Pakistan appealed to has been rejected as illegitimate by India. The Nile no agreement signed between Ethiopia and Egypt ever. The Mekong no binding treaty. China has dialogue partnership with downstream countries but no legal obligation to share water. The Euphrates and Tigris. The only agreement that existed was 1987 protocol that Turkey has repeatedly violated. And in 2025, they replaced it with a bilateral oil for water deal that benefits Turkey entirely. The reason these water wars are accelerating now in 2025 and 2026 is climate change. As temperatures rise, glaciers that feed rivers like the Indus and Mekong are melting, which actually increasing the water flow in the short term. But within 20 to 30 years, those glaciers will be gone. The rivers will shrink permanently. Every dam built today is a race to capture as much water as possible before glaciers runs out. As one analyst put it, the geopolitical competition today is a race to lock in hydraulic infrastructure before the basin's long-term carrying capacity falls. Winning now means someone else loses everything tomorrow. The countries building dams right now aren't just solving today's water problem. They are guaranteeing that their neighbors won't have water in 2050. And there is no law that can stop them. Now, let me connect this to the big picture. I have been building across my videos. In my last video, I have talked about how China is quietly building world power through trade, gold, and Belt and Road initiatives. And I mentioned that the next superpower won't dominate through military forces. It will dominate through control of essential resources. Water is the ultimate essential resource. And here is how it connects to the world power. China's Mekong Dam gave it leverage over 5 countries without spending a single dollar on military action. These are countries that are also key to America's strategy in the Pacific. Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia. Countries the US needs as partners. China has them by the rivers. India's suspension of the Indus Treaty gives it leverage over Pakistan, a country that is also deeply connected to China's Belt and Road. India is not just fighting over water, it is fighting for strategic dominance of South Asia. And the Nile dispute is reshaping the entire Middle East and Africa, with Egypt, Ethiopia, and some Somalia all repositioning themselves on a map drawn by water, not oil. The countries that will dominate the next century are not necessarily the ones with the most nuclear warheads or the biggest economies. They are the countries that sit at the source of the world's major rivers. China sits at the source of Mekong, Brahmaputra, the Salween, and the Indus. It controls the water supply of 14 countries. Not one of those countries can afford to go to the war with China, because China could respond not just with missiles, but with dams. That is power, quiet, invisible, and almost impossible to fight back against. This is why China's position on the Tibetan plate, where most of Asia's great rivers begin, is not just a territorial dispute. It is a strategic stranglehold over half of the Asia's population. And America has almost no equivalent leverage. The Mississippi doesn't flow into any other countries. Although the Colorado barely reaches the ocean anymore. The US has no water weapon. In the battle for world domination, water may matter more than weapons. And China holds more water than any other country in this world. Based on everything happening right now, here is what I expect to see next 5 to 10 years. First, India and Pakistan will have another crisis over water. India is building infrastructure to divert rivers permanently. Pakistan's crop will begin to fail. When people go hungry, governments go to the war. 2 nuclear armed nations. Watch this space closely. Second, Egypt will act militarily near Ethiopia. Egypt cannot allow 100 million people to run out of water. They have already moved troops towards Ethiopia's sphere of influence. If Ethiopia builds a second dam on the Nile, which Ethiopian officials have openly discussed, Egypt will respond with force. Third, Southeast Asian countries will be forced to choose between China and the US. Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand cannot survive without the water, which is Mekong. China controls it. That means these countries must maintain good relations with China, regardless of what America offers to them. Water creates alliances that money and military agreements cannot break. Fourth, The Middle East water crisis will get even worse. Iraq is already buying water with oil. By 2035, Iraq's rivers could be at 30% of their current flow. A country of 40 million people without water doesn't stay stable. And the wild card nobody's discussing right now. India and Pakistan is already a nuclear flashpoint. If China, which controls the headwaters of rivers that flow into Pakistan, decides to support Pakistan in the water dispute by releasing more water from Tibetan rivers, it changes the entire balance. Suddenly, a bilateral India-Pakistan water war becomes a three-way confrontation involving the world's two most powerful countries. That is the scenario that keeps geopolitical analysts up at night. Okay, I want to end this video with one thought. Every great conflict in history started over something that seemed simple. Territory, trade, religion, but beneath those simple surface issues was always the same basic human need: survival. Water is survival, the most basic, irreducible fact of human existence. And for the first time in modern history, the world's most powerful countries are using water as a weapon against each other. Not secretly, not accidentally, deliberately, strategically, as part of a larger game for global power. The wars of the 20th century were fought over oil. The wars for the 21st century will be fought over water. And they have already started. If this video changed how you see the world, please share it with someone, because this is the story that affects every person on this earth, regardless of which country they live in. Drop a comment below. I want to know which of the 4 flashpoints shocked you the most. Please do not forget to subscribe my channel. My name is Kavarora. I will see you in the next one.